With WesternUnion.com's 4-star rated mobile app, send money fast virtually anywhere for just about anything. Download the free Western Union mobile app today from iTunes or the Play Store, or visit WesternUnion.com to learn more.
Can you feel it?
Durant for three, bingo! Right down the chute, Kevin Durant.
NBA Lockdown with Bruce Bowen.
Gets it to James. Here's a three for the win. Goal! It is good!
The NBA Lockdown Podcast with Bruce Bowen. Along with three-time NBA champion Bruce Bowen, here's ESPN.com NBA columnist Israel Gutierrez.
Welcome into another edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. On a Tuesday, of course, we're going to preview the 3 games coming up tonight.
I know this team's a challenge to beat for us. So, I'm a little surprised we didn't play better. I didn't think we didn't play hard. We got to be sharp with our coverages, and, we got to move the ball better. Our offense, stalls out, and that impacts what we're doing on the defensive end.
That was Indiana Pacers coach Frank Vogel. I'm, of course, Israel Gutierrez. Bruce Bowen's here with us. Bruce, we haven't really got a chance to talk about that Pacers-Hawks game with the Hawks upsetting the Pacers in Game 1 because it happened on Saturday. Let me just get your thoughts on where the Pacers are, because apparently nobody knows where their floor is because they keep going lower and lower, it feels like. I watched that game in the first half thinking, okay, the Pacers recovered from that slow start. They're going to eventually pull away in this one, and it was the Hawks that did it. And I know the Hawks match up well with their shooting bigs and their penetrating point guard and Jeff Teague, but the Pacers looked like a team that's forgotten how to play basketball together. They look like a team that's just a bunch of individuals attacking. Frank Vogel kept saying, move the ball, move, let's get going, stop letting the ball stick, and yet they kept doing the same thing. Every time Evan Turner had the ball in his hands, eyes on the rim, going straight to the rim. Same with Paul George, same with Lance Stevenson, and, of course, it always didn't work out every time. What do you see from the Pacers that's making you think that this extended tailspin is not going to be able to turn around anytime soon?
It's the fact that they haven't resolved the issues that they had going into the playoffs. And you can't just do it by saying, okay, we worked some things out here. No, maybe it takes one of those 2-hour practices where you get back to the basics of what you do. And ball movement, as you said, Izzy, I'm watching Lance Stevenson. I think he's one of the best or the most underrated players that can create shots for his teammates. But he gets into the whirling derbies of the old babies at the Rutgers, and next thing you know, he dribbles it off his foot. Or he takes the shot, and it's my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. When you don't have continuity as a group, when you don't have distribution of the basketball, when it's not moving from one side of the floor to the other, it puts so much pressure on your offense. And when your defense is not stopping teams as you did earlier in the year, it just continues to add to the confusion. So they're not defending, Izzy. You're not defending the three-point line. You're not getting offensive production within your confines of your offense. So now where do you go? That's what I've seen in there, and it looks like a team of confusion. George Hill doesn't look demonstrative out there, and you just can't have that play. Evan Turner, it's a spin move every time into his shot.
Yes, thank you. It's so obvious. I don't know how you don't guard him anticipating that same move every time.
And if I see it, Izzy, and if you see it, coaches are saying that out there. So the Hawks are prepared for that. They're like, hey, it's going to be a spin move at some point. And it's sad because we know what we saw with this group first 2 months of the season. They were on a mission. Now, their only mission now is to try to find that team that was playing the first 3 months of the season.
No, they're on a mission. They're on a recovery mission. They're trying desperately to find their game again, and they can't find it. And, you mentioned George Hill. Man, talking to Frank Vogel before the game, they have to encourage him to be aggressive. And, one place I go with George Hill, because I always look back or think back to last year's Eastern Conference Finals at the start of it, and a lot of people, you talk about the point guard matchup between George Hill and Mario Chalmers, and a lot of people just sort of gave the edge to George Hill because I guess in most people's minds, Mario Chalmers makes too many boneheaded plays. But really, that was more of in his past. Now those don't come as often. And when you compare those two now, one of them, and Mario Chalmers, is aggressive. He makes plays. He's got an irrational confidence about him. He takes and makes big shots. George Hill has to be convinced to be aggressive, at least with this group, at least lately. And, I heard Frank Vogel talking about it before the game. It's like, don't pass up open shots. Take the ball to the rim. And it's just like, why do you need to be told to do these things? Like, if you have an opportunity, especially with the way this group is going, and you have an open shot, you take that shot. And George Hill isn't really allowing himself to be a factor in this turnaround, and that's a problem. And when your backup C.J. Watson, who's missed a bunch of time, comes back and severely outplays you, he didn't necessarily do that Saturday, but the regular season he did, that's a problem. So George Hill's one place to look at. And then, man, this Roy Hibbert situation is becoming pretty interesting. He's a guy who, they paid a bunch of money to, and last year in the postseason, he turned it on against the Knicks and the Heat in the postseason and looked great. It raised the scoring average from somewhere around 11 to about 17 in the playoffs, shot 6 points better from the field and from the free throw line, got a couple more rebounds a game, was up to 11-plus in the playoffs. And you would hope that this would sort of ignite him again being in the postseason. But Frank Vogel says, well, last year is mostly about matchups. The way the Knicks played defense opened up Roy to get offensive putbacks, to get pin downs inside. Same thing with the Miami Heat. And Atlanta's not a good matchup for him. He basically spends a lot of time on the perimeter defending Pero Antic or, Paul Millsap even if they go that route, or Mike Scott. And then, offensively, he's giving you nothing. I mean, he's giving you nothing. And late in that game, he sort of was kind of a bull a little bit and decided to put up some points as if he wanted to make a point and say, hey, look, I can still score if you give me the ball. But I don't think his teammates have very much confidence in him, and I don't know if he's going to be able to get out of these shooting woes. I mean, his last 6 games, Bruce, in the paint, he's shooting 29%. In the paint! And he's 0 for 13 outside the paint in those last 6 games. So I don't know what to make of Roy Hibbert right now other than to say, Jan Mahimi, who Frank Vogel said cares more than anybody else in the team, I might give him more minutes than I do Roy Hibbert, and I might make it obvious pulling Hibbert early in this game too.
Well, you talk about George Hill, Izzy, the mindset. When he was in San Antonio, great kid, loved him, but doesn't have that mentality to necessarily say, I'm going to take over right now. He's been so accustomed to playing with players of great character where this wasn't a concern that, the spiraling, what's going on with the group. And I think that that's starting to affect George Hill as far as, they're not playing well, and he doesn't know what to do because, he's so accustomed to just, flowing with the flow and not creating any disturbance. He doesn't have that mindset where it's like, what? We're struggling right now. I'm going to run this team the way it should be ran. And then you talk about Roy Hibbert. He had 4 turnovers last game, Izzy. And I was just looking at him like, wow, he's being exposed defensively. This is where someone like him, 7'2", let's say 270 plus. He needs a defensive system, not about necessarily matchups, but you guard this guy, and our defense is we're going to force everybody baseline, and everyone has to rotate and help. Because all Coach Budenholzer is doing is just getting the switch on him with Paul Millsap, and go ahead, Paul, do your thing. And I give Roy credit for giving great effort and hustle, but it takes him away from the basket, and he doesn't get back to the basket.
Yeah. The other part about this is as much as, we want to sort of dissect the Pacers and their issues, which have been going back a while, we mentioned this. This isn't a great matchup for Indiana, these Atlanta Hawks. And the Hawks are pretty good. And they get mocked all the time because, 38 wins, and then, if they were in the Western Conference, they wouldn't even be sniffing the playoffs. But this is a team that their lineups were so inconsistent all year long because their injuries, not only the Al Horford injury, season ender that happened in December, but you had DeMar Carroll missing a handful of games. You had Kyle Korver missing some games. You had Jeff Teague missing a few games. They've had to, Antic, they've had some just inconsistencies in the lineup, and there was a stretch between February and March where they went 1-14, and you thought, well, this team's bad. No, they're not bad. They just, were inconsistent with their lineups, and they finished the season 7-3, which is a good, strong finish to secure that playoff spot. And now it's not like they're really playing pressure-free per se, but they're playing like a team that knows, hey, this is how we play. This is how we produce when we're good. And as Kyle Korver called them, the head of the snake is Jeff Teague, and Jeff carved up that Pacers defense Saturday. That's obviously one of the best defenses in the league. Even when they're struggling offensively, they still should be good defensively. He scored 20 of his 28 points on drives on Saturday, Bruce. He got 7 of 9 from the field on drives and hit 6 for 6 from the free throw line as a result of drives. And that is sort of the definition of breaking down a defense. So Jeff Teague, I think, deserves plenty of credit contributing to that Pacers' demise. We're going to take a quick break right here. When we get back, we go north to Toronto.
Coming this summer, the 2014 FIFA World Cup from Brazil. Every goal.
The shot, Donovan scores! The USA leads by 2!
Every save.
Here's Germany up, steal, closer. In the box, the shot is stopped.
Every match. Wherever you are this summer, take the FIFA World Cup with you. It's on ESPN Radio and the ESPN Radio app.
I got one thing to say before we go into the game.
Ooh, I never get those kind of cheers when I curse at people. But, hey, that was Masai Ujiri, the Toronto general manager, saying bleep Brooklyn during a impressive pep rally before Game 1 between Brooklyn and Toronto. It got a lot of attention. I thought it was, he was kind of caught up in the moment. I thought that scene outside of the Air Canada Center was incredible, and I'm glad they kept cutting to it throughout the game. I also thought the Raptors blew an opportunity in that game. The Nets weren't playing particularly well. Paul Pierce wasn't really giving you much. Joe Johnson and Darren Williams were, but Paul sort of saved his best for last, which is kind of what he's prone to do. But I thought the Raptors, whether it would be DeMar DeRozan struggling and putting up bad shots or not really playing to their strengths, not really running a lot. Kyle Lowry was kind of forcing the issue. They looked like a team that hasn't been in the playoffs and, sort of played right into the Nets' hands, kept the game close, and like I said, Paul Pierce pulled away. Bruce, do you think the Raptors played to the Nets' identity, or was this a situation where the Nets are clearly the better team and forced the Raptors to play that way?
I think the Nets are a better team because of the quality of players that they have, Izzy. This is something that I said all along, is that I felt like the experience of Brooklyn having players that have been in the playoffs and championship series and won championships would win over as far as the youth and the athletic abilities that Toronto guys have. I mean, Kyle Lowry, and I think it's only 2 individuals that have actual playoff experience for the Toronto Raptors, and that's Amir Johnson. So that coming into play, you're going to have DeMar DeRozan, who's the first-time All-Star, first time in the playoffs. He's going to have the anxiousness of wanting to perform well, because all he's heard is about how it changes in the playoffs and how your game changes. You got to take your game to another level. And this Brooklyn Nets team, they're very good at taking away team strengths. And that's something they did. I heard Bill Simmons make mention that Kyle Lowry would be the best player in this series for Toronto. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, because they have length. And when he runs the pick and roll, I think Brooklyn will guard that pretty well. And it just so happened to, now you're going to have to help me, Izzy. I've butchered his name a lot, but
Valanciunas.
There you go, my man, Valanciunas. He was huge, and I think because he didn't have necessarily any expectations, and he didn't have the ball a lot. So he was able to get hustle plays and then just play within himself. I thought the electricity in the whole city of Toronto was fantastic. And I know we talk about the crowd outside. That was impressive. You see that in college, but not necessarily at the NBA level. And And I must say this about Masai Ujiri. He's a buddy of mine, Izzy, and you are so true. When he got caught up in a moment, right before he says that, I see the MC. He reaches for the mic, and Masai like, no, I got this, baby. And I can just see it in him, like, it's like, no, man, when they reach for the mic, go ahead, give it to them. But I think it's more about the experience of Brooklyn and having that experience. That's what plays out big right now.
Well, it's funny because, DeMar DeRozan, you would think as a guy who only shot 43% from the field, you probably shouldn't encourage him to take many jump shots. He was 1 for 9 on jumpers on Saturday. But during the season, he averaged 9.6 points per game on jump shots. That's tied for 7th best in the NBA. So it wasn't terrible that he was taking those jump shots. He's just got to hit 4 out of 9 instead of 1 out of 9. And maybe all of a sudden the Raptors are in this thing. It's interesting, though, with the athletes that they have, you would think that they would run more. But in the regular season, they only got transition offense on 10.1% of their plays, which is last in the NBA. On Saturday, they didn't run a ton. It was still less than 10%, 9.9, but they were effective. They got 88% of those. They only missed 1 and scored 18 points. I think they really need to, even though it wasn't necessarily their strength during the regular season, really need to push the ball against the Nets, because if they just sort of run that half-court offense and force Kyle Lowry to run into 2 or 3 people every single time, that's not going to really work for them, is it?
No, it's not, Izzy. But, again, you have to take into account they're doing this against Brooklyn. And this is a young team. And with young teams, coaches are holding back the horses, because that leads to more opportunities to turn the ball over. Because when you're younger, all you do is you have all that energy. You just want to go. And Coach Dwayne Casey has done a fantastic job of keeping his group, together as far as turnovers are concerned. But you just got to look back at this and try to build on it and realize that they're going up against some future Hall of Famers in Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. Joe Johnson only took 13 shots. And this is what I was saying would take place. Paul Pierce with 13 shots. Kevin Garnett with 5. You have the wherewithal of having a go-to guy in Joe Johnson at any given moment, but Paul Pierce taking over late. See, there's one play that was involved with Paul where he gives the ball to Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett turns around and hit a jump shot. Now, he hadn't had a bucket up until that point. But even with the fact of him going over, he's contributing, and you don't want to give them opportunities. So Paul, next play, gets a 3-point shot. Then pump fakes from 3, gets a layup. It's the veterans. It's knowing how to handle those situations on the road that pays big dividends for the Brooklyn Nets.
All right, well, we'll see where this series goes. But if Brooklyn can sort of take control in this and win a second game in Toronto, it looks like it's not going to be the longest-lasting series ever. And it's great for the Nets. The more rest they can get, the better off they can be. So remember that headline in the Toronto paper, Raptors versus Dinosaurs. Well, the Dinosaurs get rest. They can do some things. So we're going to move on to the Washington Wizards and the Chicago Bulls.
It doesn't really matter if you're home or away. At any given night, somebody can get beaten. It comes down to execution, intensity of the game, and the right kind of play calls, I guess. And like I said before, we had a shot to put them away in the third. We just lit up on the gas.
That was Taj Gibson after the Chicago Bulls lost their playoff home opener 102-93 to the Washington Wizards. We talked about Game 1 yesterday. We didn't really talk too much about Nene and the way he scored. He had a game-high 24 points, but 7 of 13 of his field goals came from outside of 10 feet. That's a career high in makes for 7. That's a career high in attempts for 13. Bruce, I heard Charles Barkley say yesterday that Nene is a guy whose biggest knock on him his entire career is just that he gets injured all the time. All of a sudden, he looks healthy. And he's hitting mid-range jumpers. I mean, and there was a lot of discussion, from Washington fans. Oh, we're actually better without Nene, gives Gortat more. No, when he's hitting that shot right there and the Bulls are leaving him wide open, that's good offense if he can hit it.
Yeah, it is good offense, and he's a good offensive player. It has been an unfortunate career for him as far as being injury-prone. I remember him in Denver. You know, he used to give Tim a hard time because not only on the defensive end, but you also had to worry about what he'd do on the offensive end as far as knocking down that little mid-range or elbow shot. That's something that he does well, and if you disrespect him like that, he's going to knock it down on you. But he also can do it with his back to the basket. So he's giving you a different variety of ways to score, and he sets screens. He plays a normal big. He can run the pick and roll. You have to worry about picking and popping. And so with all the pressure that John Wall puts on them as far as looking at someone coming off that screen or off the pick and roll and attacking the basket, now the big has to help, which leaves him wide open. But I think his experience as well, of having that experience all those years in Denver, helps him out tremendously with this young team in Washington.
Well, look, this is going to be – I think the Wizards go into this, as much as they want to win this game, this is going to be like a child's nightmare when they go into that game because you're going to have just a worked-up Joakim Noah. It's going to be intense. The Bulls know that if they lose their second game in this series, go down 0-2 and after 2 home games, not only is this series over, but this whole season is going to be pretty much a giant disappointment after what they were after what they did, you know, coming back and surprising everybody and winning at a consistent level and you know, getting a home court advantage in the first round. Like, that's something when Derrick Rose went down that we didn't expect this team to do again, and yet they did it again. So, you know, in Chicago, it's going to be it's just going to be hellish for Washington. And if they can withstand an early run or first half just intensity from Noah and the Bulls, then you're going to see if you've got something special in that Washington team. Otherwise, this could be a situation where a young, relatively inexperienced playoff team just kind of gets it handed to them, and then they have to recover before they go back home for Game 3. But that's going to do it for this edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. Thanks for listening on the playoff edition, which is going to be every single day of the week. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy those Game 2s, and we'll talk to you again on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to the NBA Lockdown. For more great podcasts, visit the Pod Center page at ESPNradio.com.
For his birthday, I want to send my godson to a playoff game. With the 4-star rated Western Union app, I can send him money conveniently from anywhere and make sure it gets there by tip-off. WesternUnion.com is making things so simple nowadays, and right now, they've got a special promotion going on. Download the free Western Union mobile app, and if you're a new customer, you can send money for 0 fee by using the promo code 2014-2014.
One discount per transfer, no cash value, void where prohibited. This offer expires May 18th. Western Union also makes money from currency exchange.